Hey guys, thanks for being here. Thanks for stopping by. Mike Cucumber, it's good to see you again. AVA, thanks for being here. I hope that you guys will share this out. I'm not going to get too wrapped up in what I normally do with my openings. I do want to thank my show supporters, channel members, subscribers. Hate watchers even, because this is really kind of directed at a broad swath of people. So as everybody knows now, I'm sure, if you have your finger on the pulse of the political realm here in the United States, conservative political commentator and 31-year-old founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, was deleted from life today, just this afternoon, on a college campus in Utah. And I wasn't, I never was a huge fan of Charlie. Hi, Sarah. Dirk the Daring. I agree with the premise of the question. I reject the definition of political violence as the ruling class if you're referring to sending us off to war, but that's a different philosophical conversation. So I maybe ask me to clarify again sometime. But even when I was more of a conservative instead of a paleo-libertarian type, I rejected a lot of Charlie's philosophies in how he presented them, and I don't want to say bombastic because I can be rather bombastic myself. So it really had less to do with him being bombastic, but more of kind of a shallowness to his philosophy. And I know that sounds funny saying that about someone like Charlie Kirk, but I found that his argumentation was shallow most of the time. And so even when he would engage with people on college campuses, he very rarely actually took the time to get into a Socratic conversation with them, and took more pride in dismantling his philosophical opponents than he did in trying to convince them that his philosophy was better. And I believe we can all be guilty of that. I think that is true for anyone. We can just be so headstrong in our philosophical views that sometimes we want to argue, and we want to destroy our opponents. I say that stuff all the time when people are accusing me of not knowing what I'm talking about philosophically about my views or whatnot, and they come at me with misrepresentations of my political perspective, my worldview philosophy. I will frequently tell them, you're welcome to come on my channel and on my platform and embarrass me live if you think you can, but I will destroy you philosophically. And no, Sarah, you're right that a lot of times the college campus scene is not a place for a Socratic conversation, but I have done a lot of, engaging in political and even theological philosophy with people in settings much the same as what Charlie did, and I found I got a lot further in engaging in a Socratic conversation with people, even in a crowd, more often than not, than just in dismantling them. So all that aside, there are some differences. I think Charlie played identity politics, sadly, a lot more often than he needed to. I do think he did take a lot of his arguments down to an us versus them in the sense of identitarianism. But he was a powerhouse, and he was a warrior for his truth, and that in and of itself is enough for me to admire in a person. And I do think that we need to be looking for more things that we can admire in our philosophical opponents, and that's what's sadly lacking. I have a friend, John, if you're watching, and I hope you will come back and watch this. John asked me on Facebook about, why are you against preaching certain types of hate, but you preach other types of hate? And I asked him to clarify, and he goes, well, you know what I'm talking about, enough said. And so I asked him if he thinks that if he's referring to me, calling out the rampant corruption in law enforcement. And that's not hate. I don't hate individual cops. I don't believe in hating individual cops just for being cops. Are there some cops that I despise? Absolutely. But I'm also an adherent to the non-aggression principle. And that means I do not believe in doing violence to other people as being the initiator of force. I reject the initiation of force. I believe in the use of force for self-preservation. And that, to me, is the only right position to have. I don't believe in going out and initiating violence to prevent violence from being initiated, which is really the same position that a lot of people, or an insane position that a lot of people have. I'm going to do harm to you before you do harm to me. And that, there again, is not a rejection of self-defense or defense of others. It's a rejection of doing violence to people over disagreements. And, here in Minnesota, where I live, you never know. I'd say Minnesota the same way a lot of Latinos and Latinas use Spanish words. They'll be speaking in a perfectly fine, kind of Midwest sounding accent, and then they'll go to say something in Spanish, and they'll be talking about going to a store, and they'll see a certain item on the shelf, and they'll say it with the Spanish inflection or the Mexican inflection. So Minnesotans do that too when they say Minnesota. But here in Minnesota, we have seen an influx of violence. We saw 4 Democrats shot, 2 of them killed in, I think it was June. I can't remember. Just a few months ago. And then 2 weeks ago, we had an act of political violence directed at churchgoers, and they children at the and that was an act of political violence. It was a political motivation. It wasn't just a religious hatred. It was a political motivation. And oftentimes political or religious hatred is a direct result of political ideology. And so we are seeing an uptick in political violence. Now, on the front end, I want to say we have to be careful to not say this has never happened in the United States before, because it's patently and demonstrably untrue in the history of the United States to say that it's never happened. In fact, it's happened as recently as 50 years ago when we saw a massive uptick of political violence in the time that became known as the Days of Rage. There were daily political bombings, political assassinations of local government officials, from city council members, mayors, law enforcement, and those were politically motivated, absolutely politically motivated, and vice versa. There were many, the leader, Fred Hampton of the Black Panthers, was politically assassinated by the Chicago Police Department. Chicago, did I say? I might have got that wrong. It might have been Chicago. I can't remember. I can't remember where he was when he was assassinated, but he was definitely assassinated, and it strikes me as absolutely paramount to our understanding of political violence, to understand that it has happened in the United States on infrequent bouts, and it always has to be resisted. It always has to be pushed back on. And if we can't come to a place where we can have those Socratic conversations that I mentioned early in the video, if we cannot come to the place where we are able to sit down and engage with our philosophical opponents on a philosophical level, and all we can do is spew hateful rhetoric, then even if we are not the ones initiating the violence, the actual physical violence, the actual physical aggression, then we have to be willing to accept responsibility on a moral level for it. And that's where we're at today. Like Charlie Kirk was not taken out today because he was running around threatening people. Charlie Kirk was not assassinated today because he was advocating for the ethnic cleansing or the genocide or mass homicide of a particular segment of the population of the United States. Charlie Kirk did not advocate for people who identify as trans or are, however it's said today. He wasn't advocating for them to be harmed. He's not advocating for leftist progressives to be harmed. He advocates for a defeat of their ideology. And that's what having philosophical ideologies is all about. Yeah, I'm sorry, you cannot, there's not one person amongst us right now, not one, that doesn't have a worldview philosophy, that doesn't have a political ideology. And it's like somebody said to me, I don't care about politics. They said that to me today as we were talking about what happened to Charlie. And the response to that is always, you don't have to care about politics, but rest assured politics cares about you. And saying that you don't care about politics is a worldview philosophy. Saying you don't care about politics is a political ideology. It is absolutely foundationally a political ideology. Now, it's a very dangerous political ideology if you really are consistent and you don't care about politics. But I don't believe that's true for 98% of the people who say, I don't care about politics. What they're saying is they don't care to invest the time to understand politics, but they know on the surface what they align themselves with or who they align themselves with. And exactly, Dave. And thanks for being here, by the way. Thanks to everybody who's tuning in. So the thing that we can do that will prevent political violence, and once again, I want to emphasize, when I say political violence, I mean doing harm to others, physical harm to others, aggressive bodily harm to others over your political differences is political violence. It is not political violence for me to look at you and say your political ideology is stupid, it's wrong, it's philosophically incorrect, it should be destroyed on the floor of debate. That is not political violence. Political violence is being willing to do harm to another human being, even up to the ending of their life because you disagree with them. And Charlie Kirk was not assassinated today because he was advocating for violence against other people. Charlie Kirk was assassinated today because somebody disagreed with his politics. That's it. Or someone disagreed with somebody's politics, and Charlie Kirk became the target for that. The Minnesota politicians that were targeted, once again, here in Minnesota this year, that were targeted, one killed along with her husband, and another severely wounded along with his wife. They were Democrats. They were leftist progressives. They were targeted because someone disagreed with their ideology. That has to end. Because for the actual first time in the history of the United States, that I have been able to ascertain in my own reading and my own study, this is the first time when I have seen both sides applauding when someone who is on the opposite side of the philosophical aisle from them is harmed. That doesn't mean there aren't progressive leftists, or, as I refer to them, normie cons, who didn't speak out against what happened here in Minnesota, who haven't already spoke out about Charlie Kirk. I've already heard people from both sides of the aisle speak out against what happened to Charlie. But I have seen both sides also make terrible arguments. Before the news was officially announced that Charlie was dead, the very first thing that I saw from conservative commentators in the conservative sphere was that it was a trans shooter. And the progressive sphere was already saying that it was a right-wing, according to the manifesto that they found, it was a right-wing Christian nationalist. MSNBC said it more than likely was one of Charlie's own supporters just shooting guns for the fun of it in the crowd. That sounds like an irresponsible comment, but it's not. It is an ideological celebration of what happened to Charlie, couched in speculative terms, designed to make people afraid. There's no other way to address that. There's no other way to see it. And already commentators have come out and addressed this, pointing out that Charlie said that the loss of life is worth it to defend the Second Amendment in the United States, saying things like he got what he asked for. Folks, when we make martyrs of people over their politics, right, Linda, the shooter is still at large. When we make martyrs out of people over politics, we are inflaming the political divide. Charlie's death is not going to be a uniting factor in the United States. Charlie's death is not going to be the healing balm to the wound that has become American political ideology. Charlie's death is going to be a wedge that is driven deeper into the already splintering log that is America. That is our republic, folks. It is not going to get better now because Charlie's dead and people are going to come together, because there are radicals on the right who are going to be looking for revenge. There are radical right-wingers who will look for revenge. There are radical left-wingers who will look to exacerbate this situation. They will provoke. Folks, Charlie dying, the Hortmans dying, the 2 children dying at Annunciation in Minneapolis. These people, these are fuel for a fire that not one of you, I don't care how goddamn tough you think you are, none of you who are talking about this civil war is coming and we're ready, you're not ready. Folks, you are not ready for what that could mean. Let's say they catch this perpetrator. Let's say they catch the shooter tonight. And they do. They get the shooter and they get the manifesto and they get all social media content and they find out that this shooter is a progressive leftist, conservatives, as many Republicans, as many red state. Do you think that? Do you think that's gonna quell the anger on the right that the right already feels, and sometimes rightly so? Like, folks, it is okay to be angry about the direction and the moral decline and the decline in the embracing of the natural rights of Americans. It is okay to be angry about that. There's anger in and of itself is not immoral. Anger in and of itself is not sinful or unethical. So you have to understand that anger is an emotion that has been given to us for a reason, whether you believe in God or you don't. Anger is an emotion that has been given to us for a reason. The responsibility of a logical people is to understand your anger for what it is and then to use the anger to motivate you to do something positive about what it is that has angered you. But if your anger motivates you to do violence, you are not doing a positive. You are contributing to the problem. You are contributing to the end of the society which you claim you love. You are contributing to an end of the culture that has allowed you to have the varying opinions that cause you to feel that you are at odds with the person you have wanted to do harm to. You have to use that anger and channel it in the right way. And we have lost grip of being able to channel the emotion of anger into a tool by which we can shape society in a positive way. And we now allow our anger to become a bludgeon, to become a hammer, to become a wood-splitting maul. So that all we have to do is swing that weapon, swing that tool to cause more breakage and more splitting. And I don't know how many of you have ever split wood by hand, but the reality is, when you split wood by hand, you listen. When you hear that crack, when you hear that begin to split, you swing again, and you swing again, and you swing again. The more it cracks, the more you swing, because when you hear the crack, you know you're close to accomplishing your controlled anger. Is you swinging a splitting maul until you have decimated the log that you are attacking. So, folks, Charlie Kirk and the Hortmans and these poor children at Annunciation and all these others that have been shot in the name of political ideology, their logs being split Charlie Kirk falling to the stage floor from the chair he was sitting in today is not a step towards healing. It is a step towards a very active and very real civil war that none of you are ready for. None of you are ready for this. And if you know someone who is gleefully looking forward to that, then you need to distance yourself from that person, because that person will be the first person that will do harm to you. Ozzy Crosby, I agree with you. People are poking the bear. Absolutely poking the bear. They want to provoke the violence. And somebody had asked earlier, what about when the political elite, they're the ones, they want this, folks. Donald Trump doesn't want peace between the left and the right. Guys like Gavin Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer, they don't want peace between the left and the right. They want us as Americans to be at each other's throats. They want us in positions where we're doing battle with one another. That's a very astute observation, David Botter. I'm thankful that you're commenting. They want us to be at variance with one another, but they don't want it to just end at philosophical differences. They want us to be ready to do physical harm. That's what they want. Our political leaders, especially the higher up that you go, they genuinely want us to be willing to do violence towards one another. The governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, flat out said he wants the left to get more mean. But I know people on the right who are talking about revenge already. And I want people to tell me what that looks like. What do you think that's going to look like? I'm incredibly critical of law enforcement. Very critical of law enforcement. I believe that the institution of policing in the United States is corrupt from the streets to the top. I believe the criminal justice system is indeed the criminal justice system. It is a justice system operated by criminals. But I do not at all believe that we should be targeting the people or celebrating their deaths. Now, somebody murders someone, and this is probably one of the few places where I'm at variance with most other paleo-libertarians and other people in the libertarian camp. If you catch a person red-handed, which is an old, colloquial saying, that means if you catch them with blood on their hand, and it's impossible for anybody to deny it, that person should be executed and left as an example to society. I thank you. I'm sure I probably do sound delusional. Most people who don't have an actual argument make insults, and one of them is frequently that I'm delusional. But the reality is that the more that they can keep us angry at one another, the more that they can provoke and stoke the fires of fear and hatred, the more they can control us. And already today, after Charlie's body not even cold, commentators were already talking about how law enforcement has got to step up, not to find the killer, but to do something to prevent more political violence being conducted with guns. I heard multiple commentators talk about this. law enforcement has got to do something. And the only way that they see things like this ending is by stripping us of our guns. And that's why they want us angry at one another. That's why they want us in fear of one another. Because they're trying to build this argument to disarm us because we cannot be trusted. And that's why this political violence has got to stop. Folks, if someone's trying to harm you, defend yourself. If someone's trying to harm your neighbor, defend your neighbor. You end the threat. Someone standing up and speaking their mind over political ideology, you should be willing to interpose yourself between them and anyone that would want to do harm to them. Over the last few months, I have gone to multiple progressive left protests to engage with people, and I have told them, look, I adamantly disagree with your progressive left ideology, but I would give up my life to defend your freedom to hold those views and to speak them. And I have said the same thing to people on the right who disagree with me on issues. I would give up my life for you to be able to keep and hold on to the freedoms that allow you to express those views. I would die defending that liberty. But I will never do harm to another human being because they disagree with me. And this doesn't end until we tell the powers that be enough is enough. Until we tell the powers that be we are not going to be divided anymore. You know, the progressive left has this really great chant that people united cannot be divided. And I think that's something that we have to wholeheartedly embrace as a country today in this republic, that we the people united cannot be divided. And that's why they keep us at each other's throats. Reason with people. Disagree with them all day long. But do not resort to political violence. And when the time comes that your country has turned on you and they're willing to imprison you and destroy you, there is a time and a place for taking up of arms against tyranny. But a progressive leftist holding a different view from you, or a conservative right-winger holding a different view from you, is not the tyrant that you need to take out. They're just like you. They're just like me. They're not the threat. Tyrants and their enforcers are the threats. And we have to be very, very careful about talking about wanting to have another civil war or another 1776. And the more that this stuff goes on and the more that people speculate about doing something to stop it today, the more likely it is to happen. And nobody that's watching this is ready for that actual kind of war. You aren't ready for that. If you're a praying person, pray for Charlie's family, his children and his wife. And if you're not a praying person, maybe it's time you thought about being one. I love this country, and I'll do whatever I can to preserve it. But I'm not going to hurt somebody I disagree with.